What you are about to witness is no ordinary gathering. This is the ritual no enemy was ever meant to see, the brutal Viking rite performed before battle. A ritual so secret that many of its details were whispered only by the survivors who lived to tell the tale. Imagine this. The night is thick with fog. A cold northern wind whips across the coastline of a forgotten fjord. In the distance, a circle of warriors stand around a fire. They are bare-chested, their skin smeared with ash, their eyes burning with something otherworldly. You hear chanting, low, guttural, almost inhuman. Then suddenly the sound of a horn pierces the night. What gave the Vikings their terrifying edge? Was it their ships, their weapons, their ruthless discipline? Or was it something darker? Something buried deep in their rituals, something that could turn ordinary men into fearless beasts, men who could stare death in the eye and laugh. Historians often write of their raids, their conquests, their brutality. But very few speak of the ritual that happened the night before battle. Because this ritual was not about victory. It was about transformation. It is the year 873 AD. On the edge of a frozen forest in Scandinavia, warriors gather before setting sail. Their enemies across the sea will see only iron and fury, but tonight in this sacred circle they prepare their souls. Every Viking knows, you cannot step into battle as a man. You must enter as more than a man, you must become a vessel of Odin's wrath. And so the ritual begins. Before any chanting, before any sacrifice, there is silence. The Vikings stand shoulder to shoulder, shields on their backs, weapons in the dirt. They close their eyes. They listen to the wind. They imagine the enemy's screams. The silence is not peace. It is sharpening. It is the calm before the storm. And then, one man breaks the silence. The seer. The seer draws a knife of carved bone. Each warrior steps forward, one by one, and presses their palm against the blade. Blood drips into a wooden bowl. This is no ordinary oath. The blood is mixed with ale and herbs, brewed into a drink that binds them not only to each other but to the gods themselves. To drink from the bowl is to say, I no longer belong to myself. I belong to Odin. I belong to war. The warriors form a circle, stamping their feet against the frozen ground. They begin to chant in unison. The words are old, older than their fathers. They do not ask the gods for mercy, they demand fury. Their voices rise until they sound like wolves howling into the night. And in that moment something shifts. Their breath fogs heavier, their eyes widen, their skin flushes red. It is as if the chant itself is dragging them into a trance. At the center of the ritual lies a chest. It is bound in iron and marked with runes. None but the seer may touch it. Inside, it is said, lies the secret of the berserkers, the thing that makes them more than human. But what is inside? Herbs? Bones? A cursed object? For now it remains closed. The seer runs his hands over the runes, whispering to Odin, whispering to the dead. The chest will open when the time is right. As the ritual builds, a warrior collapses to his knees. His body convulses, his eyes roll back, and foam gathers at his mouth. The others do not help him. They watch, because this is part of the test. If the gods have chosen him, he will rise stronger. If not, he will never rise again. The fire crackles. The warriors hold their breath. And the seer whispers a single word, chosen. But chosen for what? What you've just seen is only the beginning of the Vikings' brutal ritual. But the darkest part still lies ahead. The moment when the chest is opened and the warriors step fully into their transformation. What lies inside that chest? And why did every Viking fear it, yet crave it? That secret, we will reveal soon. The Viking day begins before the sun rises. In the frozen stillness, the settlement is quiet except for the sound of axes splitting wood and the lowing of animals. But for the warriors, the morning begins with something far harsher. They wake and plunge their bodies into icy rivers. The shock of freezing water is not just survival, it is discipline. Pain is their first teacher. They believe that if they can endure the cold sting of water, they can endure the blade of an enemy. Unlike common farmers, Viking warriors eat for war. Their morning meals are thick with meat, fish, barley bread, and fermented drinks. The food is not only to build muscle, it is to prepare their bodies for endurance. Each bite is eaten with silence, broken only by muttered words of gratitude to the gods. To them, eating is not pleasure, it is fuel for battle. Every day, even when there is no raid, warriors train. They wrestle in the dirt, clash with wooden swords, and run across rocky hills barefoot. Their training is brutal. Broken bones are not misfortune, they are lessons. Pain is not weakness, it is proof of strength. No one joins the shield wall without scars. Scars are the badge of readiness. Beyond training there is unity. Each morning, warriors form a shield wall, shoulder to shoulder, practicing until their movements are one. The shield wall is not just defense, it is trust. A Viking must know the man beside him will not falter, will not retreat. To break formation is worse than death. It is betrayal. Not every ritual waits for the eve of battle. Some warriors offer blood daily. A small cut on the arm, a drop spilled onto the earth. They whisper to Odin, to Thor, to Freya. It is not the size of the sacrifice but the consistency. Each drop of blood is a reminder, my body belongs to war. Behind every warrior stands a woman, mother, wife, sister, or seeress. In the mornings, women prepare charms, runes, and herbs. They whisper blessings into the warriors' weapons, binding them to victory. Some women weave battle cloths, banners marked with ravens and wolves, symbols that terrify enemies from afar. The warrior steps into battle not only with his own spirit, but with the unseen strength of those who blessed him. Few know of this, but Vikings practiced a form of breathing ritual before battle. They called it storm breathing. Standing in silence, they inhaled sharply, exhaled like roaring animals. Their chests heaved, their minds sharpened, their hearts raced faster. By the end, they entered a state between calm and madness, a warrior trance. This daily practice made them able to face chaos without flinching. Not every man can join the ranks of Viking warriors. Each morning, young men are tested. Some must run barefoot across snow, others must hold burning coals in their hands. These are not just trials of the body, they are trials of the soul. The weak are sent back to farm. The strong are welcomed into the circle of warriors. It is brutal, but it ensures only the fearless step onto the battlefield. Remember the chest from the first ritual? It does not only appear before battle, it is seen in whispers of daily life. Sometimes, the seer carries it to training grounds, setting it at the edge of the shield wall. No one dares to ask what is inside. But they all fight harder when it is near, as if its presence alone stirs something primal. Is it a relic? A curse? Or is it the very heart of their power? As night falls, the warriors gather once more. They sit in silence, sharpening blades, staring into the fire. One young warrior asks, "Why must we suffer so much each day? The cold, the blood, the pain?" The elder beside him leans close and whispers, "Because only suffering makes you ready for the god's gift. Tomorrow the chest will open." The young warrior stares into the flames. What gift could be so powerful that it demands daily pain, blood, and silence? The daily life of a Viking warrior was not about survival, it was about transformation. Every ritual, every drop of blood, every freezing plunge, every scar, it was training the soul as much as the body. But the truth is this: their daily life was only preparation for something greater. Because when the chest finally opened, everything would change. Not every man who picks up a sword is called a Viking warrior. To join the war band, one must enter the forbidden circle. The circle is drawn in the dirt with blood and ash. No outsider is allowed to witness what happens within. Only the chosen may step inside, and once you do, there is no turning back. This is the beginning of initiation. The seer raises a goat by its horns. With one swift motion, its throat is cut, blood spilling into the earth. But here's the secret: the sacrifice is not for the gods alone. Each initiate must dip their fingers into the blood, then mark their own foreheads with it. This is the moment of surrender. The young man whispers, "I am no longer mine. My life belongs to Odin." Once marked, the initiates face the trial of endurance. They are stripped down and left in the frozen night, only their weapons in hand. No food, no fire, no comfort. Some do not return. Those who survive come back with hollow eyes and frostbitten skin, but their spirits burn hotter than before. The trial proves one thing: if you can survive the cold void of the night, you can survive the void of death. The next ritual is darker still. The initiates are led into a chamber where the skulls of past warriors are stacked high. The air reeks of smoke and decay. One by one, the young men must place their ear to a skull and listen. The elders claim the dead whisper secrets, warnings, visions, or even curses. Those who hear nothing are considered unworthy. When dawn breaks, the final trial begins. 2 fires are lit, creating a narrow path between them. The flames are high, the heat unbearable. The initiate must walk through slowly, chanting Odin's name. If he runs, he fails. If he screams, he is dishonored. But if he walks through without fear, he emerges as something new, reborn in fire, untouchable by fear. At the end of initiation, the seer brings forth the chest once more. The runes glow faintly. The young warriors kneel, desperate to know what lies inside. But the seer does not open it. Instead he whispers, "Not yet. Only when the blood calls for it." This fuels their hunger, their obsession. What power could be hidden in that chest, that even the most fearless warriors are denied its secret? The final step is not of blood or fire, it is of the soul. Each initiate must confess his deepest fear aloud before the war band. If his voice cracks, he is mocked. If he hesitates, he is beaten. Only when a man can shout his fear without trembling can he crush it underfoot. The message is clear: to be Viking is not to live without fear, it is to own it and then destroy it. When the rituals end, the seer asks one question. Not, "Are you ready for war?" Not, "Will you kill for Odin?" But this, "Are you ready to never return?" It is a question that stabs the heart. Because every Viking knows, stepping onto the battlefield is stepping into the arms of death. Yet to refuse is dishonor worse than death itself. At the end of initiation, the warriors stand bloodied, burned, and scarred. They have endured fire, frost, and fear. But then the seer does something strange. He pulls out a small pouch of herbs, sprinkles it into the fire, and suddenly the flames turn green. The warriors gasp. The seer smiles and whispers, "Tomorrow the gods will walk with us. And the chest will finally open." The flames crackle, green smoke rising into the night sky. What herbs were those? What power do they summon? And what lies inside the chest that requires so much suffering to unlock? The Viking initiation is not a ceremony, it is a crucible. Blood, frost, fire, skulls, fear, each step strips away the boy and builds the beast. But the real transformation does not come from endurance alone. It comes from the moment the chest is opened. And when it does, the world will never see them as men again. The warriors gather again, the air heavy with smoke and frost. Tonight is different. Tonight no one speaks. The fire burns, but it does not roar. It crackles as if holding its breath. Every eye is fixed on the seer. Every heart pounds with the same thought. Tonight the chest will open. The seer kneels beside the chest. His hands tremble as he traces the runes carved into the iron bindings. He whispers a chant so low it sounds like the hiss of a serpent. Then a sudden crack. The lock breaks. The chest creaks open. Inside there is no gold, no treasure. Instead there are three things. A bundle of dried herbs black as ash. Bones carved with runes. A drinking horn bound in iron. This is the Viking's true weapon. The seer takes the herbs and throws them into the fire. Instantly, thick black smoke rises, heavy and choking. The warriors breathe it in, their eyes watering, their chests burning. Some cough, some fall to their knees. But then, something changes. Their veins bulge, their eyes widen, their hearts race like drums. The smoke does not weaken them, it awakens them. The seer takes the carved bones and tosses them onto the ground. They clatter loudly, landing in strange patterns. The warriors lean forward. These bones, taken from the remains of past champions, are believed to carry the wisdom of the dead. The seer reads the patterns like a map, declaring who among the warriors will lead, who will strike first, and, most terrifying of all, who is destined not to return. The chosen do not flinch. To be named for death is not a curse, it is an honor. Finally, the seer lifts the horn bound in iron. It is filled with a dark, bitter brew, blood, ale, and the ashes of herbs. Each warrior must drink. As the liquid touches their lips, they grimace. It tastes of death. But within moments, their bodies begin to tremble, their vision sharpens, their fear dissolves. They are no longer men. They are no longer human. They are something else entirely. The chanting begins again, louder than before. The warriors beat their chests, stomp their feet, howl like wolves. The smoke, the bones, the drink, it all collides inside them. Their faces twist, their voices deepen, their movements grow violent. They slam their weapons against their shields, sparks flying. This is the moment of transformation. The men who entered this circle will not be the same men who leave. Now the truth is revealed. This ritual is what creates the berserkers. Warriors who fight in a frenzy so fierce that even wounds cannot stop them. The herbs cloud their fear. The blood oath binds their will. The bones of the dead whisper courage into their ears. When the ritual is complete, the berserker is more than a soldier. He is Odin's wolf, unstoppable until death claims him. But here's the terrifying part. The ritual does not always end in glory. Sometimes a warrior drinks too much, breathes too deeply, loses too far to the madness. His body convulses. His mind shatters. He collapses, dead before ever reaching the battlefield. The seer does not mourn him. Instead he whispers, "The gods chose him early. Why would they risk death in the ritual itself? Why would they willingly step into madness, knowing it could kill them before battle even begins?" Because to the Vikings, death was not the end, it was the doorway. And to step through Odin's doorway with courage was the greatest honor of all. But still one question lingers. Where did the chest come from? Who carved its runes? And why must it remain hidden between battles? The ritual ends with silence. The warriors stand trembling, their breaths ragged, their eyes shining with madness. The seer raises his hands and declares, "Tomorrow you are no longer men. You are wolves of Odin. You will not fight as mortals. You will fight as gods." The fire roars, the chest is closed, and the night ends. But one thought burns in every warrior's mind. If this ritual can turn them into gods on earth, what happens when the gods themselves demand payment? The chest is opened. The ritual is revealed. And now we see the truth. The Vikings' power was not only their ships or steel, it was the transformation of their very souls. But here's the terrifying twist. The ritual was not the end. It was only the beginning. Because before the battle itself, there was one final night. A night of visions, sacrifices, and a secret so disturbing it was almost erased from history. The night was heavy. The air smelled of burning pine and charred animal fat. At the heart of the Viking camp, a circle of fire blazed. Only chosen warriors were allowed inside. Outsiders could only hear the sounds, low, guttural chants, broken by sudden screams that chilled even the bravest. It was here, within the circle, that the most sacred and terrifying ritual began. Every warrior who stepped in was no longer just a man, he was expected to shed his human self and walk out as something else entirely. But what happened inside this circle? The few who survived never spoke openly, and those who did were never believed. At the center of the fire circle was a large wooden bowl, steaming with a dark liquid. It wasn't meat. It wasn't wine. It was something far stranger, a brew mixed with herbs, blood, and intoxicating substances gathered in secrecy. The warriors would kneel, one by one, and drink deeply. Their eyes would roll back. Their breaths would quicken. And slowly, they began to shake as though their very souls were being ripped from their bodies. Some historians whisper that this was the origin of the Berserker Fury, a deliberate chemical gateway into madness. But was it just herbs? Or something darker? Something that opened a door to powers not entirely of this world? After the drink, each warrior was handed a sharpened blade. Not to fight with, but to cut their own flesh. A slice across the arm. Blood poured freely into the fire. The smell of iron and smoke merged, filling the night air. This was no ordinary sacrifice. By giving their own blood, the Vikings were not just asking Odin for strength, they were binding themselves to him. The oath was simple: you will not return unless you return in glory. But here lies the secret: not all men were willing to bleed, and those who refused never saw battle. They vanished from the sagas, erased like shadows at dawn. A goat, a boar, sometimes even a horse. The animal was led into the circle, eyes wide, nostrils flaring as if it knew what was coming. The warriors' chants grew louder, a pounding rhythm that echoed like the heartbeat of the earth. The throat was cut, the blood collected, and the carcass burned. But the blood was not wasted. It was smeared across faces, drawn into symbols on shields, and rubbed into weapons. The belief was chillingly simple: by taking the life of another creature, you carried its strength into battle. And by marking your weapons with its blood, your blade would hunger for flesh. The chants rose to screams. The fires roared higher. Warriors, painted in ash and blood, began to convulse. Some howled like wolves. Others crawled on all fours, their eyes wild and glassy. This was the moment outsiders feared most. The ritual was no longer symbolic, it was real. Men shed their humanity. They became beasts. The Berserker trance had begun. But here is where the mystery deepens. Some warriors swore they felt another presence guiding them, an unseen force gripping their limbs, sharpening their senses, filling them with unstoppable rage. Were they merely drunk and drugged? Or had the ritual truly summoned the spirits of the gods? The truth may never be fully known. And here lies the haunting question, the one that has echoed through centuries of whispers. Did the Vikings truly summon power from Odin himself? Or did they unknowingly call something darker, something that gave them victory but demanded a terrible price in return? Because though they won battles, though they carved empires into the world, the Vikings also lived short lives. Many died before their 30s. Many went mad. And some were said to vanish in the night, claimed by the very spirits they called upon. The ritual gave them strength. But at what cost? The answer waits in the shadows of history. We've seen the ritual, but we've not yet seen its most terrifying form, the transformation of the berserkers. Warriors who became wolves, bears, and demons in human flesh. In the next part, we uncover how these men turned into monsters, and why no enemy could stand before them. The word itself, berserker, still carries weight. In Old Norse, berserker meant bare shirt or bare shirt. Some believed these warriors wore nothing but animal pelts, while others swore they went to battle shirtless, exposing their skin as a symbol of fearlessness. But to those who faced them, names and meanings didn't matter. They were monsters. Men who could not be killed easily, who fought without pain, who snarled like animals and struck with inhuman ferocity. But here's the secret historians struggle to explain. How did ordinary Viking men turn into beasts? What happened during the ritual that made them more than human? It began slowly. As the ritual fires roared, the chosen few started trembling. Their muscles spasmed. Their breathing became erratic. Some fell to the ground, growling. Others clawed at their own flesh until blood streamed down their arms. Their faces twisted, not in pain but in savage delight. The camp would fall silent, for everyone knew these men were crossing into the berserkers' trance. But here lies the unsolved mystery. Was it madness? Or was it possession? Not every berserker was the same. Some were said to embody bears, massive, roaring, unstoppable. Others embodied wolves, fast, cunning, and vicious. These warriors didn't just imitate animals. They became them. Their comrades swore they could hear growls, see shadows of beasts surrounding the berserkers, even catch glimpses of glowing eyes in the smoke. Was this imagination? Or was the ritual unlocking a hidden side of man, a primal wolf that modern life has long buried? A normal man would flinch at the bite of steel. A normal man would cry out when blood poured from his wounds. But not the berserkers. They felt nothing. Arrows pierced them and they kept charging. Blades cut into their flesh and they fought harder. Some accounts even say they laughed while bleeding. Imagine being an enemy soldier, facing a man who doesn't bleed like you, doesn't fear like you, doesn't even die like you. How do you fight such a creature? The answer was simple. You didn't. You ran. For centuries, historians argued over the cause of this berserker rage. Some claim it was mushrooms, Amanita muscaria, the red and white fungi known to trigger hallucinations and madness. Others say it was henbane, a poisonous herb that can make the body numb and the mind frenzied. But here's the chilling possibility. What if it wasn't plants at all? What if the rituals were a form of controlled possession? A way of letting Odin or darker spirits take hold of the warriors? Because here's the twist. The berserkers didn't just fight like beasts. They often couldn't remember what they had done after battle. It was as if something else had borrowed their flesh and left when the killing was over. The transformation came with a price. When the rage ended, berserkers collapsed. Some foamed at the mouth. Some shivered violently. Others slipped into deep sleep for days. And many never woke again. The ritual gave them strength beyond men. But it was a bargain. And every bargain has a cost. This raises the most terrifying question. Did the Vikings build their empire on borrowed power? Power that demanded payment in blood and lives? We've uncovered the berserkers' transformation. But the rituals did not stop with the warriors. The Vikings also believed their weapons themselves had to be awakened, blessed, fed, and bound to their owner's fate. In the next part, we reveal how blades, shields, and spears were prepared for war, and why every Viking believed a weapon carried a soul. In the silence after the berserker ritual, the clang of hammers rang out. Weapons were brought to the fire, not for sharpening but for blessing. Every sword had a name. Every axe carried a history. To a Viking, a blade was not forged. It was born. And just like a child, it had to be raised, nurtured, and bound to its owner. Warriors believed if they failed this, the weapon would betray them in battle, slipping from their grip, shattering, or worse, refusing to kill. The first step was sacrifice. A drop of blood smeared across the steel. Sometimes animal blood. Sometimes their own. The weapon had to drink before it could kill. It was said that a sword fed with blood before war would hunger for more. That once it tasted flesh, it would guide its owner's hand, striking with supernatural precision. But here's the eerie twist. Some warriors whispered that if you failed to keep feeding your weapon, it would turn on you. Next came the runes. Using knives or heated iron, warriors carved symbols into their weapons, runes of victory, strength, and protection. Some inscribed the names of gods. Others etched secret words only they could understand. The runes were not decoration. They were contracts. By carving them, the warrior bound himself to his fate. If the runes were carved wrong or if the weapon rejected them, the owner was doomed. Weapons were then passed through fire, not to melt or shape them but to baptize them. Flames were believed to burn away weakness, leaving only strength. Sometimes warriors whispered prayers into the fire as the blade glowed red. Others screamed into it, demanding their weapon obey. It wasn't the steel that changed. It was the bond between man and weapon, the moment the two became one. Shields were not forgotten. Many were painted with blood and decorated with symbols of ravens, wolves, or dragons. But here's the mystery. Some shields were said to be made from the wood of sacred groves, or worse, from the wood of coffins. To carry such a shield was to carry the dead with you, to make them your guardians. The question is chilling. If true, were these shields protectors or prisons for restless souls? Finally came the oath. Each warrior raised his weapon high and swore upon it. To never retreat. To never dishonor the blade. To never let it go until one of them was broken. It wasn't just a promise. It was a curse. Breaking it meant not just shame but eternal punishment in the afterlife. And so, when the Vikings marched into battle, they carried not just steel, but living spirits bound to their destiny. The weapons were ready. The warriors were transformed. But one more secret remained: the women. The seeresses, the prophetesses, the mysterious figures who whispered to the gods and decided who would live and who would die. In this part, we reveal the hidden power of Viking women and how their presence shaped every battle. The campfire burned low. Warriors stood painted and bloodied, weapons bound to their fate. But then silence fell. A woman, cloaked in black furs, stepped forward. Around her neck hung charms of bone, teeth, and iron. Her staff was carved with ancient runes. The men parted. No warrior dared meet her eyes, for they believed she could see not just into their souls, but into the moment of their death. She was the Volva, the seeress. Without her blessing, no battle could begin. The Volva did not speak lightly. Her words carried weight heavier than steel. She would close her eyes, sway, and begin chanting in a voice that didn't seem entirely her own. Sometimes she called upon Odin. Other times upon Freya or Hel, goddess of the dead. Her chants grew louder, more violent, until her body shook. Then came the prophecy: who would return home, and who would fall. Some warriors cried with joy, others trembled in silence. And here's the darkest part: the seeress was never wrong. To the Vikings, the Volvas were not just women. They were mortal shadows of the Valkyries, the divine maidens who rode wolves and chose the slain in battle. Many believed the Volvas were chosen by the Valkyries themselves, carrying fragments of their power. Their blessing meant you had the Valkyries' favor. Their curse meant you were already marked for death. The question that lingers through history: were these women simply skilled manipulators of fear, or did they truly hold the strings of fate? The seeress did not only predict, she performed. She tied strands of wool into knots, chanting with each pull. These knots were said to bind fate itself, tightening the victory of some, strangling the hope of others. Warriors often begged her to bind their destiny to triumph. But she never took gold or silver. Instead, she demanded something far more terrifying: obedience. Disobey a Volva and you were cursed. And curses in Viking belief clung tighter than chains. At times, the seeress demanded more than blood oaths. Before great wars, some rituals required human sacrifice. Prisoners were brought forward, throats slit, their blood poured into the earth as the seeress raised her staff to the sky. To the Vikings, this was not cruelty. It was transaction. Life for life. Victory for blood. And the seeress was the one who decided who lived and who was offered to the gods. The power of the Volvas stretched beyond the battlefield. They were consulted by chieftains, jarls, even kings. Wars were won or lost on their words. One prophecy could raise a man to the throne, or condemn him to die forgotten. Some whispered that kings feared the seeresses more than they feared Odin himself. And perhaps they were right. Because while Odin demanded worship, the Volvas decided when and how you met him. The women had spoken. The gods had been invoked. The weapons had been awakened. But what happened in the hours before battle, the tense night when warriors faced their mortality, was the most brutal and haunting ritual of all. In the next part, we'll reveal the chilling night before war, the feasting, the howling, the sacrifices, and the unearthly calm that descended before the storm. We've seen the blood, the fire, the women who whispered with the gods, and the weapons that were bound to fate. But the most haunting moment of all came not on the battlefield, but the night before it, when death was near enough to touch and every Viking warrior knew he might never see another sunrise. What did they do in those final hours? How did they prepare their minds for slaughter? What rituals turned fear into fury? Let's step into the last night before battle. The Vikings believed the night before battle was not a time of silence, but of feasting. Meat roasted over open flames, mead flowed like rivers, and the sound of laughter and chants echoed through the camp. But this was no ordinary celebration. Every bite of food, every gulp of drink carried weight. It was the last meal, the final time many of them would ever taste meat or feel fire warmth. Some feasted with abandon, tearing flesh from bone like wolves. Others ate in silence, their eyes distant, already preparing for the fight ahead. The mead was different this night. It was not only fermented honey. Sometimes it was mixed with herbs or even drops of blood, brewed to stir courage, cloud fear, and sharpen the senses for the madness to come. The warriors drank deeply, shouting to Odin, to Thor, to Freya, calling for victory and for a seat in Valhalla. Every horn raised was a reminder, tomorrow I may die. Tonight I drink like a god. Then came the chant. Deep, rhythmic, pounding like drums inside the chest. Warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, their voices rising into the cold night. Some chants were prayers for protection. Others were promises of vengeance. But the most terrifying were the death chants, songs that declared they were already dead men, walking corpses who had nothing to fear. Imagine being an enemy, hearing hundreds of voices chanting that death itself could not touch them. As the chants reached their peak, silence suddenly fell. The seeress or chieftain would step forward, carrying a blade, a goat, a horse, sometimes, in darker nights, even a prisoner. The throat was slit, the blood collected in a bowl, and the earth drank the rest. Warriors dipped their fingers in the blood, smearing it across their faces and weapons. The act was both symbolic and savage, a promise that they too would give blood come dawn. After the feast, the chants, and the blood, something eerie happened. The camp grew quiet. Warriors lay on the ground, staring at the stars. Some whispered to loved ones long gone. Others gripped their weapons, murmuring prayers to Odin. For a few hours, the camp looked like a graveyard, hundreds of men sleeping as though they were already dead. And in a way they were. Because every Viking believed his fate was already woven by the Norns, the weavers of destiny. Whether they lived or died tomorrow was not in their hands, it was already written. Just before first light they rose. The seeress lifted her staff. The chieftain raised his sword. And the warriors swore the oath. To never flee. To never break their shield wall. To never dishonor their gods. Their voices carried through the morning mist, a vow that bound them tighter than chains. Once spoken, there was no turning back. This was the final ritual. When dawn broke, there would be no more feasts, no more chants, only steel, blood, and the screams of battle. The night was over. The oaths had been made. Now came the most chilling part of all, the march to battle. The sound of shields beating, the war songs that echoed like thunder, and the unearthly terror they struck in their enemies. In the next part, we step onto the battlefield itself, where ritual turned into reality. The night was over. The fire had burned down to ash. Blood had been spilled, vows had been made. Now the earth trembled, not from thunder but from the march of the Vikings. What happened in those first moments when they rose from the silence of death sleep to the roar of war? Let's step into the battlefield ritual that made enemies collapse before swords even clashed. At dawn the warriors stood, their faces still streaked with blood, their eyes red from sleeplessness, their voices raw from chants. They did not walk silently. They stomped. Each step was deliberate, heavy, and synchronized, like the heartbeat of a giant rising from the ground. Every man carried his shield close, his axe ready, but it was their unity that struck terror first. Then came the sound. Hundreds of shields struck by weapons, fists, and axes. The sound carried for miles, rolling across valleys and echoing through forests. To their enemies it was thunder. To the Vikings, it was the heartbeat of Odin himself. The shield beat was not random, it was rhythmic, hypnotic, like war drums. It broke morale before swords even met. Over the pounding came the war songs. Deep voices rising in chants that spoke of death, glory, and Valhalla. Some were slow and guttural, crawling under the skin like something ancient and inhuman. Others were fast, rising into frenzied screams. To their enemies, it sounded less like men and more like beasts, wolves, bears, and spirits of the dead marching to devour the living. But the most terrifying sound was yet to come. From within the ranks, the berserkers stepped forward. Bare-chested, scarred, and half-mad from the rituals of the night before. Some had smeared themselves with blood. Others wore animal pelts, wolf, bear, or boar. And then they howled. The sound was not human. It was the shriek of animals possessed, of men who had let go of humanity itself. The howl carried across the field, chilling even their own allies. Imagine you are on the other side. You see the mist roll away, revealing a wall of shields, a storm of pounding, chanting, and howling beasts. You hear death sung like a hymn, you feel the earth tremble. Some enemies broke before the first clash. Some fled. Some wept. And those who stood their ground had already lost half the battle in their hearts. As the sound reached its peak, the chieftain raised his sword. The stomping grew faster. The chants louder. The howls more frenzied. Then came silence. One heartbeat of quiet. One breath held across the field. And then chaos. The Vikings surged forward, a tidal wave of fury, crashing against the enemy like a storm sent by the gods. But the sound was only the beginning. What truly made the Vikings feared was not just how they entered battle, but what they did once the fighting began. In Part 10 we'll uncover the savage combat rituals, the berserker trance, and the chilling acts that turned the battlefield into a ritual sacrifice. The march, the songs, the shield beats, they were just the beginning. Once the battlefield turned into chaos, the Vikings revealed their final and most terrifying ritual, the berserker trance. This was no ordinary rage. It was a possession. A state where men became monsters, where pain was meaningless, where fear was impossible. But the way they entered this trance, the secret steps behind it, was what truly made enemies whisper that the Vikings were not men but demons. Before the first clash of steel, berserkers froze. They stood in eerie silence while the rest of the army roared. Their chests heaved. Their eyes bulged. They trembled, not from fear, but from the boiling storm inside them. The silence was short. The storm was about to break. Then it came, the transformation. Some roared like bears, shaking their shields as if they weighed nothing. Others snarled and howled like wolves. Their voices cracked, their faces contorted, and suddenly they were no longer men. They were beasts. Enemies believed that animal spirits, bear, wolf, or boar, had entered their bodies. Even allies kept their distance, fearing the berserkers might turn on them. One secret behind the trance was pain. Berserkers trained themselves to ignore it, even to feed on it. Some cut themselves before battle, smearing wounds with dirt and ash to infect them, making their bodies feverish and wild. The pain didn't weaken them. It ignited them. Legends claim berserkers felt no blade pierce, no fire burn, no bone break until the battle was over. Once the trance fully consumed them, berserkers' eyes changed. Some rolled white, showing nothing but pale orbs. Others grew so bloodshot it looked as if fire burned inside. On the field, berserkers performed rituals that shocked enemies. Some bit their shields, chewing wood and leather until blood ran down their mouths. Others leapt onto enemy lines alone as if immortal. Some ripped helmets from enemies with bare hands, tearing at throats and faces. Each act wasn't just violence, it was theater. A performance designed to break the enemy's spirit before their body. But here is the darkest secret. Every battlefield was treated as a sacrifice. The blood spilled was not only victory, it was an offering to Odin, to the Valkyries, to fate itself. Every enemy slain was another proof that the gods were watching. And every Viking who died in this frenzy believed he had purchased his ticket to Valhalla. When the rage ended, berserkers collapsed. Some fell into sleep so deep they couldn't be woken for a day. Others shook violently, their bodies broken from the fury they had unleashed. It was not free. The gods had taken their due. And so, the berserker trance was both a gift and a curse. It made them gods in battle but left them vulnerable after. To face such eyes was to face death itself. And worse, those eyes never blinked. It was said that when a berserker locked eyes with an enemy, that enemy's fate was sealed. On the field, berserkers performed rituals that shocked enemies. Some bit their shields, chewing wood and leather until blood ran down their mouths. Others leapt onto enemy lines alone as if immortal. Some ripped helmets from enemies with bare hands, tearing at throats and faces. Each act wasn't just violence, it was theater. A performance designed to break the enemy's spirit before their body. But here is the darkest secret. Every battlefield was treated as a sacrifice. The blood spilled was not only victory, it was an offering to Odin, to the Valkyries, to fate itself. Every enemy slain was another proof that the gods were watching. And every Viking who died in this frenzy believed he had purchased his ticket to Valhalla. When the rage ended, berserkers collapsed. Some fell into sleep so deep they couldn't be woken for a day. Others shook violently, their bodies broken from the fury they had unleashed. It was not free. The gods had taken their due. And so, the berserker trance was both a gift and a curse. It made them gods in battle but left them vulnerable after. But not all rituals were wild and bloody. Some were subtle, whispers carried by seers, omens read in the sky, and strange sacrifices made in the quiet of night before battle. As we proceed, we will uncover the omens and forbidden rituals the Vikings believed determined victory or death before a sword was ever drawn. The berserkers had their frenzy. The warriors had their shield walls. But before the first axe was swung, before the first arrow flew, there was silence. Silence filled with whispers, firelight, and rituals that even the bravest Viking feared. For in the Viking world, no battle was fought by men alone. It was first decided by omens, by signs, by rituals that connected warriors to gods and spirits. To march without them was suicide. The first omen was always in the sky. Ravens, the birds of Odin. If they circled above the camp, it meant the All-Father was watching. If they flew ahead of the army, it meant victory. But if they scattered, flying in opposite directions, it meant death. Many armies delayed marching simply because the ravens gave the wrong sign. Imagine, hundreds of warriors ready for war, but waiting for the wings of a bird to tell them when to move. Next came the runes. The seer or chieftain would carve small symbols into bone or wood, then cast them into the dirt. The shapes they formed were studied in silence. Some runes meant victory, others doom. Some warned of betrayal, others spoke of death waiting in the shadows. If the signs were bad, warriors might still march, but they marched knowing half of them were already doomed. Omens were not enough. Blood was demanded. Goats, horses, or even captured enemies were sometimes sacrificed before battle. Their blood was spilled on the earth, their entrails studied for signs. If the organs showed strength, it meant the gods favored the Vikings. If they showed weakness, it was a warning of slaughter to come. But there are whispers, darker sacrifices. Some say chieftains gave their own blood, or even their own kin, to ensure victory. These tales are shrouded in mystery, yet they refuse to fade. One ritual was whispered about but rarely admitted, the ritual of silence. Before some battles, entire camps went mute. No words, no songs, not even a cough. 4 hours, hundreds of men sat in silence, staring into fire, waiting for the gods to speak through dreams or visions. To break the silence was to doom the battle. And always before the greatest battles, the seeress was called. Draped in dark robes, carrying a staff, she stepped into the camp like death itself. Her words were riddles. Never clear, never easy. Tonight, a wolf will feast. Tomorrow, a raven will not fly. From the east, a shadow comes. Were these warnings? Promises? Traps? The warriors never knew until it was too late. Here lies the mystery that still haunts history. Did the Vikings shape their fate through these rituals, or did they only seal it? If the runes said death, did they march into battle already defeated? Or were the omens real, whispers from gods that mortals could not resist? The truth is lost, but the fear it inspired was real. The omens had been read, the sacrifices made, the warriors prepared. But one last ritual remained, the binding of brotherhood. For no Viking marched to war alone. This video reveals the blood oaths and secret pacts that tied warriors together in life, in death, and in Valhalla. Steel, fire, and omens gave the Vikings strength, but none of it compared to the final ritual before battle, the forging of brotherhood. For in the chaos of war, a Viking could not trust fate alone. He needed to know that the man beside him would never falter, never flee, never betray. And so, warriors sealed their loyalty not with words, but with blood. Before dawn, chosen warriors gathered in a circle. The chieftain or a priest stood in the center, holding a sacred bowl of blood, sometimes animal, sometimes human, sometimes mixed with meat. Every warrior stepped forward, cutting his palm. Blood dripped into the bowl until it swirled dark and thick. This was not symbolic. It was a contract written in flesh. The bowl was then passed around. Each warrior drank, tasting the blood of his brothers. The act bound them together, body to body, soul to soul. If one man fled in battle, he betrayed not just his clan, but the blood in his veins. And for that, death was the only punishment. For some groups, the oath did not end with drinking. Warriors carved matching symbols into their skin, on the chest, the arms, or the face. The scars became permanent marks of loyalty. To see a man with your mark beside you in battle was to know your own strength was doubled. But here lies the danger. Those who bore the same mark also bore the same fate. If one was cursed, the others felt it too. The strongest bond of all was the death oath. Two warriors swore that if one fell in battle, the other would avenge him, or die trying. Breaking this oath condemned a Viking not only to shame, but to exile from Valhalla itself. The gods would see him as faithless, unworthy of eternity. It was said some warriors feared breaking the death oath more than death itself. Once the blood was spilled and the oaths spoken, the warriors sang, not war songs this time, but low chants of loyalty. It was a promise whispered into the night. I die for you. You die for me. We feast in Valhalla together. To outsiders it sounded like a curse. To Vikings, it was the sound of immortality. But here lies the chilling question. Did these rituals merely strengthen loyalty, or did they merge souls? Some believed that once oaths were sealed, brothers shared a single fate. That if one was wounded, the other felt it. That if one was doomed, both were. If true, then the battlefield was not just blood and steel. It was a web of souls, bound together by choice, sacrifice, and something darker. The oaths had been sworn. Brotherhood sealed in blood. But the battlefield demanded more than courage, it demanded cunning. We are about to uncover the secret strategies and hidden battle tricks that made the Vikings not just brutal, but unstoppable. The world remembers the Vikings as brutal savages, men of axes and fire. But those who faced them knew the truth. Behind the wild rituals and blood oaths lay something far more dangerous: cunning. The Vikings did not march blindly into slaughter. They fought with strategy, deception, and secrets that made their enemies underestimate them until it was far too late. Not every Viking attack began with roars and howls. Sometimes it began with silence. Under cover of fog, warriors paddled their longships without a sound. The first sign of danger for villages was not a horn or a war cry, it was fire suddenly rising from their homes. By the time enemies reached for their weapons, the Vikings were already inside their walls. One of their deadliest tricks was the feigned retreat. Vikings would clash with an enemy, then suddenly break formation and flee. Their enemies, convinced they had won, chased them eagerly, only to be lured into traps where hidden Viking forces waited. What seemed like cowardice was, in truth, a deadly snare. When cunning gave way to direct battle, the Vikings unleashed their most terrifying formation, the shield wall. Hundreds of warriors locked shields, moving as a single beast of wood and iron. Behind it, spears stabbed through cracks, arrows rained from above, and berserkers waited to charge through openings. It was both fortress and weapon. And when it advanced, nothing could stop it. But some tricks were darker still. Villages, castles, and ships were often set ablaze not to destroy, but to herd. Flames were weapons of fear, pushing enemies into corners, forcing them into narrow paths where the Vikings waited. Fire turned the battlefield into a hunting ground. To the Vikings, fire was not chaos, it was strategy. Not all Viking warriors fought in plain sight. Some disguised themselves as traders, monks, or even captives to slip inside enemy walls. At the signal, a horn, a shout, a raven released, they turned from harmless strangers into killers. This required more than strength. It demanded patience, cunning, and absolute discipline. The greatest Viking strategy was unpredictability. One raid came at dawn, another at midnight. One attack stormed the front gates, the next tunneled through the earth. One battle was won with berserker madness, the next with silent cunning. Enemies never knew what to expect. And fear of the unknown was often deadlier than the axe itself. This is where modern wisdom lies. The Vikings taught that raw strength was not enough. Victory belongs to those who balance brutality with intelligence, chaos with cunning. Even today, their lesson rings true. The fiercest warriors are not those who charge blindly, but those who can think like wolves, adapt like ravens, and strike like storms. But strategy was only half the battle. What made the Vikings truly unstoppable was what they did after victory. I will show you the chilling post-battle rituals, the sacrifices, the celebrations, and the secrets of how they honored the dead and fed the gods. This is where we are going to pause for now. In the next episode, we will uncover a lot more shocking revelations. Stick around because you don't want to miss. To see more of our videos, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. Now that you've witnessed the brutal Viking ritual before battle, the question is yours to answer. Do you believe the spirit of the Vikings still lives among us today? If you do, subscribe right now and share in the comments why you think their legacy still survives. And if you don't believe, if you think the Vikings are nothing but a dark chapter in history, subscribe anyway and tell us your opinion. Was it fear? Was it faith? Or just sheer brutality that made them unstoppable? Your voice matters, and this story isn't complete without your thoughts. Drop your belief, your fear, or even your anger in the comments, and let the battle of ideas continue.